Hey everybody, those of you on my Facebook group probably want to know what the story is with the ugly yarn I posted yesterday. So, the camera, of course, is always squirrely. There we go. So, the story, the ugly yarn, which, here you can see it. It's pretty hideous. It's got like weird, like dreadlocks. It does that. I don't even know what that is. It does weird stuff. So this was the ugly yarn I posted on our Facebook group yesterday and was like, hey, check out this really horrible yarn I just made. Story forthcoming tomorrow. So here's the story. As most of you, if you follow me, know, I have what I guess most people would consider pretty successful fiber business. I make and sell yarn all the time to people who seem very happy with it, which is great. So you would assume, like, I'm even in the works putting together a how to spin yarn, sort of yarn spinning for the lighthearted course that may be coming out supposedly later this year. I need to finish that. I'm like 60% done. So anyhow, my point being, you would think I pretty much knew what I was doing. And so you're like, what's up with this weirdness? Well, my point with this, and the reason I wanted to show it to you, was my dirty little secret of the fiber life was I didn't know how to Navajo ply. Or chain ply, as you would hear it. And that is the reason, so this is my confession, the reason I did not know how to Navajo ply, which is what this was my first attempt. This was it. You see, it was not particularly successful. The reason for that was when I first started spinning, nobody really taught me to spin, and I had some really talented spinner friends, and they were like all about this Navajo ply stuff, and I kept hearing like just kind of rumors about it. Like I heard it was 3-ply yarn, which in my imagination, 3-ply yarn meant that you took 3 singles and somehow they got plied together. And I was like, well, I don't have nearly the time or the yarn or the yardage, so in my imagination I was like, well, I'm not doing that, because like it already cuts your yardage way in half when you take it from like a long single to a 2-ply. You're like cutting your yardage in half. So I was like, man, if I got to do this, cut it in thirds, like it's gonna be like 20 yards worth of yarn, and I don't want to do that. So I never really looked into it because of that. And then I heard there was some sort of like fancy tool you could have, and I was like, I don't want to buy a tool. So that was my other excuse. And then my third excuse was, then I kept hearing I was watching somebody do it. I was like, that looks like crazy witchcraft. What are you doing? And they were like, yeah, it's like crocheting while you spin. And I was like, I'm doing good to crochet. I definitely don't need to be doing that. So needless to say, all of those reasons was why I was like, yeah, no, Navajo ply, not so much for me. But then I kept seeing, like I said, it's kind of the reason people like Navajo ply, so stay with me, is to avoid, which I think I like, that was the other thing, is this is one of my yarns that I love. It's very pretty. It's Aura Quartz. I really like it. Apparently, one of the pros of Navajo plying is, pros according to most people, is that you can you don't end up with, see how the colors, you got like the green and the pink and the blue, you don't end up with the colors all mixed in together. You end up, it kind of keeps the light colors with the light colors, so you get more of like a gradual color change instead of having it all mixed up together. I like it this way. So that's the other reason I never wanted to Navajo ply. I was kind of like, well, that you're going to really cut your yardage. It sounds scary. You have to have a tool. I thought you had to have a tool. You don't. And then I was like, but I like it this way. Like the very first time I ever 2-plied yarn, like one of these rainbow color, like multicolored skeins, and then I 2-plied it together and it did this. I thought it was like the most magical thing that had ever happened. Like I just loved it. I still do. Like watching all the different colors come together, and then I think it's really it gives you a cool, and I've been complimented by designers, y'all. So I feel like, I'm not totally alone here. I feel like by doing it this way that the color ends up really diversified, so you don't end up with like a pink part and a blue part and like whatever, it's all like mixed in together, which like I said, I've been complimented on by people who should know. So this is 2-ply, which is what I do a lot of, and it's much simpler. You take 2 singles and you ply them together, and then you end up with this, and it's lovely. So anyhow, that was an example of 2-ply. So back to Navajo ply. So I finally was just feeling really bad about myself that I was putting together a spinning course and that I was what people thought of as a good spinner, and I didn't know how to do this. I was like, by God, I must learn. So I had some really just random, like, not fancy Romney, and I spun some thin singles, and I was like, I'm going to make this. And so this is, like I said, how it came out, and it looks really bad. And my other problem, and so I'm sorry, like, buckle up, this is going to be a rambly video. Yes, it's really hideous. And the reason I'm showing you this is because I get really tired of people being overly perfectionist with themselves, and especially if you're learning to spin. Because I talk to a lot of people who have never learned to spin. I teach drop spindle classes, and everybody's always like terrified of like, oh my God, it's gonna be so bad. Like, of course it's gonna be bad. You're like making stuff that's not yarn into stuff that is yarn. Like, the first time you do that, it's gonna be kind of bad. So just accept that. See, I am what most people would consider a good spinner. I am a professional fiber artist, and I made this hot mess because it was my first time Navajo plying, and there may or may not have been babies climbing on me at the time, and maybe a dog. So that's my excuse. But anyway, so please everybody, stop beating yourself up about, like, if I see one more person post a beautiful yarn in like a Facebook spinners group, and it's like, this is the first yarn I ever made, it's kind of ugly, but I love it, and it's like gorgeous. I'm like, I think that looks like yarn I made last week. Like, I wish my first yarn I'd ever made had looked anywhere in the ballpark of yarn. So I'm showing you my ugly yarn to encourage you to not be afraid to make ugly yarn, because it's the only way to learn new stuff. So, get some fiber that you don't like, which brought me to tip number 2, which is, so after I did that and the kids went to sleep and they weren't climbing on my head, I did this, which looks, hold on, I gotta get in the focus, looks way better. See, look, that looks like I successfully chain plied, or Navajo plied. And this is actually regular old mill spun yarn. You can see it's all twisty now. But I got this and I practiced on it, and you see it turned out, this was my second attempt at Navajo yarn. And it turned out really good. So I actually, and I don't know, of course I went on YouTube when I was trying to figure out how to do this, because that's how we all do that. And there are a good many videos out there on Navajo plying, and I must just be stupid. So I'm of course going to, once I get better, I will make one, and I'm going to call it Navajo Plying for Dummies, because that's what I needed. I even watched one that was like Navajo plying for like newbies, beginners. I don't know. Like, I had issue with most of these videos. And if you have a really good one out there, I obviously didn't find it. So, like, I'm not hating on all of them. But they were all like, yeah, you tie the thing to the leader thread, and you put a loop in it, and you stick your arm through, and then boom, it's yarn. And that was not explaining things to me. Or it was the opposite, and it was like, would show you all this crazy hand stuff, but then there was like very little explanation on like what was happening. So it was just kind of like, you tie it on, yarn. That wasn't helpful either. So that also is how the ugly yarn happened, is what I had no clue what I was doing. I was just like, well, you tie it on here and you make a loop. And then I wouldn't, like, nobody told, at least that I could find, nobody was explaining that like you get the loop and then you drop it and you keep making more loops. Like, from what I could tell, I was like, is this like a single slip knot that you're holding on to the whole time? Or, so, but basically I had to make it up. So I'm probably Navajo plying in some sort of ridiculous way that is probably not even textbook correct. But I have officially, so this is my, and it's still on this like bumpy Romney, so it's not the best in the world. But I have successfully, this is the same fiber as the first one. But yes, you can see I have successfully made Navajo ply yarn. And like I said, it's just not very pretty because it's like this fuzzy Romney yarn. But yeah, you can see here, hopefully, if it focuses, there we go. I have successfully made Navajo yarn. So I have figured it out, at least in one capacity or another. But so I will try to make my Navajo yarn for dummies video, because I'm apparently a dummy and I need it broken down in like multiple steps with lots of explanation and maybe jokes. So that's gonna happen. So anyhow, that was my rambly video about my dirty little secret of not knowing how to Navajo ply, and I know how to now. So whatever, guys, I'm official. Fiber expert people, I know how to Navajo ply. I don't really know if I like it though. I mean, one pro of it, I've been researching pros and cons, is I was wrong. It does actually, I think, makes more yardage Then two-ply. So that would be my big pro for the Navajo pline, is I think it is a good way to use a lot, make kind of more out of less, which we all know I'm a big fan of. So I'm going to continue my experiments with Navajo pline. I may even try some of this fancy color work everybody goes on about with the long colors, even though I don't think I'm going to like it as much. I will try. And yeah, so that's a pro, is I do think you actually end up with less versus more. It is oddly hypnotic once you get good at it. Like, you get in the zone, and I mean, like, the house could be falling down around you, but you're like in the zone. So I think it's like probably good for you. And what else do I think it's just kind of busy, honestly. I just kind of don't really think it's for me. It's a little fussy. I mean, this one's all twisty, but yeah, I mean, it's just kind of a little fussy. I think I like my yarns, and these you can see are this is some two-plies that are thin, so you can see I make two-plies that aren't giant. But these are all alpaca natural, like, gradient ones, and I love them. But yeah, I mean, they're all really thin, as you see. But these are all just like simple, basic two-ply, which I really like. So I don't know. I think I'm going to continue to be the champion for the simple two-ply. But I just wanted to let y'all know what was up with the ugly yarn, and to not be afraid of ugly yarn or ugly knitting or ugly spinning or ugly hair. Especially if you live in Tennessee, that's very common. And yeah, so I'm probably going to go make some ugly food and then eat it. So y'all have a good day, and I will continue on. I will let you know when my Navajo pline for dummies video happens, because it's going to be like super simple, be basic. So have a good one. Happy spinning or knitting or what have you.